All right, so very good morning to all of you, and it gives me immense pleasure to
Good morning, sir.
welcome you all to LSSDC webinar series, and thank you for joining on time. And I think still people are joining in, but we will get started in interest of time. And once again, my heartiest welcome to everyone for Life Science Sector Skill Development Council webinar series, which is a monthly series which goes on.
Good morning, friends.
Which happens every month. I would request everyone to please keep your lines muted, and we will get started. And in fact, once the talk is over, we will open it for the Q&A, and that time, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, or alternatively, while the talk is going on, you can use the chat box to post your questions. So towards the end of this webinar, after the speaker completes his talk, we will take up the questions in the chat box. So with that, let me get started.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, and please, my humble request to everyone to keep your line muted till the entire talk is completed. Please do not speak in between, and keep your videos also off if possible. So, friends,
Yes, sir, sure.
for all those people who are joining it for the first time, who doesn't know about the Life Science Sector Skill Development Council, let me just quickly take you through in a few slides about what Life Science Sector Skill Development Council is all about. So, talking about council, it is a not-for-profit and non-statutory certification body under the mandate of Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. It is registered under Societies Act 1860, and it is one of the major objectives of this council is to fill the skill gap between academia and industry, and somehow come up with an ecosystem where industry-ready candidates can be put into place. So that's the whole objective and mission of Life Science Sector Skill Development Council. It comes directly under NSDC, National Skill Development Corporation, and it is basically under the mandate of Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So as all of you who knows, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship operates through NSDC, and they have formed around 38 councils, like for mechanical, for electrical, for electronics, for IT, for telecommunication, like that. For life sciences, they have formed a council called as Life Science Sector Skill Development Council. What all areas are included in life sciences? So Life Sciences Sector Skill Development Council includes pharmaceutical, which includes domestic as well as export-oriented formulation units, API manufacturers, contract research, contract manufacturing, and nutraceutical product manufacturing. So all this thing comes under pharmaceutical, which is coming directly in the purview of Life Sciences Sectors Council. And we also cover biopharmaceutics. So within biopharmaceutics, companies which are involved in research and manufacturing of biopharmaceutical products, biologics and vaccines and all. So they also come under biopharmaceutics area. And apart from that, it also includes contract research area, where all the discovery as well as preclinical or clinical research organizations, they also come within the purview of life sciences sector. So this is where all Life Science Sector Skill Development Council is operational. And I'm so glad that as a government initiative of Skill India, Life Science Sector Skill Development Council has been playing a very important and vital role of aligning industries with academia and vice versa, and also aligning academia as well as industries to government schemes. Like there are so many skill development schemes from the central government as well as different states, and there also we try and align all of them towards the more relevant schemes from the government, where funding assistance is also available. At the same time, a lot of other benefits from the government can be availed by academia as well as industry. So that's the whole purview of Life Science Sector Skill Development Council. And it is also equally important for our country, the role of life science sector, because as you may know, India is the third largest pharmaceutical industry in the world. So basically, life science sector is in high demand, especially for India, because when you say third largest pharmaceutical industry, I would go a step ahead and say that we are the third largest exporter of vaccines and medicines around the world. So that's the role. And on this slide, if you can just, I just listed few companies like Sun Pharma, Lupin, Dr. Reddy's, Teva. But apart from that, Zydus, Microlabs, Granules, Indas, Torrent, you name the pharmaceutical industry, they are all aligned with life science sector. If you talk about pharmaceutical clusters within India, the geographical location you can see towards the northern part, you have Baddi, Pantnagar, Haridwar, which is a pharma sector cluster. On the western side in Ahmedabad, towards Gujarat, in Maharashtra. And on the southern side, you have Hyderabad, Vishakhapatnam in Tamil Nadu, Chennai, and Karnataka in that Bangalore and Mysuru. And you have a belt in Sikkim as well. So that's the whole distribution of pharmaceutical clusters across our country. So we are very glad that as a non-profit, as a non-statutory certification body, we are completely involved in certification, assessment and certification of the existing employees of life sciences sector, plus for fresh skilling, for recognition of prior learning, and for upskilling. So all those programs are run by Life Science Sector Skill Development Council. So that's the brief about the Life Science Council. And now let me quickly shift gear and get into today's topic. We are very glad that we have a topic which we have selected for today's webinar is risk management and
Sir, repeat
risk
again.
enterprise risk management. So I would, it's my pleasure to really welcome our speaker. And before I introduce the speaker, I would like to talk about risk management. Like before this topic, all those who have been on a monthly basis attending this webinars, you will know that we have started from drug discovery development. We have talked about IPR. We have covered characterization of impurity profiling and all. We have talked about even vaccine development. And today we have a dynamic and young speaker who is going to cover the topic of risk management and enterprise risk management. So in my own career of last 20 years with pharma industry, like this is what I have learned, that risk management, basically it encompasses identification, analysis, and response to the risk factor that forms the part of life of any business. In today's scenario, we'll talk about life sciences business. So what is an effective risk management? It means if you are able to control as much as possible all the future outcomes by acting proactively rather than reactively. So we should not wait for an emergency situation to arrive or some surprise factor to come in, but we should act proactively. So therefore, effective risk management offers the potential to reduce both the possibility of risk occurring and its potential impact. So you can cover this both if you actually follow effective risk management in your organization. It is true for industry, it is true for academia, it is true for any business, small or big, it doesn't matter, but effective risk management is of very high importance. If you talk of, in general, what all it covers, so it includes what is the process is to identify the risk, you should assess the risk, and eventually you should have practice in place to control the risk. And finally, there should be review controls in place so that from time to time again, you can visit the situation and assess the situation and minimize those risks. So with that brief introduction of the topic, let me introduce our today's speaker. I'm so very glad and honored that we have with us Dr. Manish Biyani from Granules India. He's working at Granules India in the directorate department. He is actually a B Pharm and then M Pharm and PhD in organic chemistry at Heriot Watt University, Edinburgh, UK, 2012, sixth framework program, EU Commission. On the management front, he has completed eGMP degree from IIM Lucknow and project management modules from IIM Kozhikode and RIT EDX. So he has also completed PG Diploma Patent Law from Nalsar, and so far he has filed 27 complete patents as an inventor and 11 patents are granted to date. So we are absolutely honored to have Dr. Manish Biyani with us. His core competencies lies in technology evaluation, digital transformation, business intelligence, which includes data analytics and market research, IPR, project management and SEM, and he enables organization with project governance framework, multi-country patent strategy, business insights, aligning business with risk strategy, P&L. So it is our absolute pleasure to invite our today's speaker, Dr. Manish Biyani. Over to you, Dr. Manish.
Thank you very much, Deepak. A very good morning to everyone. I'll just share the. Deepak, you will share the presentation, or should I share it?
You can share it. You are a co-host. You can very well share your thing.
Right. Thank you very much. All right. So thank you very much, Deepak ji, for your kind introduction, and especially, the key part was for me that you have given a brief introduction, which really broadly covers what is the risk and why we should be, proactively working towards countering the risk rather than reactive. And what better example you can have considering the, the COVID situation. So before I start, my name is Dr. Manish Biyani, and today I will be covering two topics. Mainly, one would be the risk management, and the second would be enterprise risk management. The reason why I'm covering two topics is that enterprise risk management is the primary target for me. But for you to understand enterprise risk management, some basic risk management, part has to be covered because that will give you a basis of a broad overview of the enterprise risk management. So I would like to thank, first of all, Life Science, Skill Sector Development Council for, giving me this kind of opportunity to talk about risk management and enterprise risk management. In particularly Sachin ji, Deepak ji, and Vijay ji for giving me this opportunity to talk about on this topic. I would also like to see that the kind of, the objectives which Life Science has is quite similar to one more organization which I am associated, which is PMI PCC ISG Life Sciences Group, which has a similar objective. And so I would like to just touch upon that also, that we are associated with the similar kind of objectives, and both the organization have similar kind of objectives, that is to get the betterment of the life sciences. So coming to the topic, I would like to start with first risk management. And what is risk? So if you see, a risk is an uncertain event. No one would predict, like, you might have seen that no one would have predicted COVID, and all of a sudden COVID is there. First wave, second wave, especially in second wave in India, no one predicted. So it's an uncertain event which no one can predict. But was the first risk of having COVID was good enough for us to prepare ourselves for second risk? I would say yes, because once you get that kind of risk, and even in life science sector, we always knew that there could be always unprecedented events which can occur. And this kind of events, if it occurs, what are your strategies to, kind of protect yourself, your business interest? How do you protect? And that's the primary objective, that how to protect your business interest without getting affected. You have to have plan A, plan B. If plan A fails, plan B. If something like, business continuity is a very key to any business. This is not just applicable to your pharmaceutical sector, but across the industry. This will be a very common way of doing it. So let me kickstart with you in a brief manner. That is, a risk is an uncertain event or condition that if it occurs, a risk can give you both ways, a positive effect and negative effect in a project. How? Once you do the process of screening of identify risks, you will understand that it can work both ways, positive as well as negative. We will elaborate this in the further sections. So what happens is when you do a project, you will see that there will be a lot of bottlenecks, challenges, impediments. You have to identify them. If you identify them, you do great justice by doing that, and you can think about countering those, problems proactively, as it was rightly said, rather than reactive, be proactive, so that you kind of minimize or mitigate those risks. Uh, is it possible to completely, circumvent the risk? No, I won't say that it is possible to circumvent. In some cases, yes, in some cases, no. But you can definitely always look proactively as a machinery, a well-oiled machinery, to prevent that kind of stuff. Projects are based on assumptions. You make a lot of assumptions. The assumptions can go right, the assumptions go wrong. What happens is when you do this kind of assumptions, you have to make sure a project manager with experience will always talk to stakeholders, their experience. He will accumulate those experience. Based on that, he will make assumptions. Based on that, he will do the risk assessment. And based on that, he will make some strategies to prevent those risks. So it's a broad kind of a stuff which I'm giving you. Another way of doing you is that, is it only good enough to identify the risk? You will see that a lot of people have a habit of talking things in very,
Sir, voice break ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ.
your this will be, quite common when you do this. When you do analysis of the risk, I would request everyone to please mute your mic, please. I would request you can put it in chat box if you have any issue. When you do this kind of stuff, you have to make sure that you have to analyze your risk in qualitative terms and quantitative terms. What it means is that when you do a quantitative and qualitative analysis, you get numbers. You can categorize particularly your risk. That helps you to give a primary focus, that which risk I should go for and which risk I can park it aside. That is very important. What happens is focusing on very important aspects of business is very important. And many people, what they normally business suffer is that they don't prioritize their projects. They don't focus on their projects, like which one I should get that will give me as an interest to my business. They don't include their strategy aspects of it. So that is all very important element when you're doing a risk assessment, and when you're doing your projects, and as well as your business evaluation. So that is very critical. So for that, what you do is, one of the ways is to you take a risk, that what is the chances of happening a particular event. You give a probability to it, that it might happen into 10%, 20%, 100%, 50%. You just kind of give a number to it. And then what you do is you see what is the impact of it, that whether it has a massive impact, low impact, all those kind of things. Every organization can have a slight variation in their way of assessing this. We will come in more elaborative manner in the enterprise risk management, but that's how you basically do probability into impact, gives you a number, and then you categorize them into low, medium, high risk. So basically, when you do the high risk, that is very important, because your primary focus should be the high risk, because that's where your business interests are. Low risk, you can park aside as a watch list. You can always go through them whenever, as and when need is coming, and situation is very fluid. A low risk can come to a high risk also, or medium risk also, and based on that, you can kind of keep on adjusting them. But the key aspect to understand here is that when you identify a high risk, you make a plan, you make a response plan to it. What kind of response plan depends on how you categorize the risk. We'll see slightly further that how you categorize the risk, and based on that strategy, you make, how to, which strategy to apply. In general, also there are certain guidelines which have been given, and you can use your common sense part of it also to counter those kind of risks. High risk are analyzed further into quantitative. You can give monetary number also. So what you can do is, once you identify probability and impact, you can multiply it with a number that, okay, this much number is there in the terms of business. And that will give you kind of, a number for various projects, and you can categorize it accordingly. That, okay, this gives a very big business impact. We should really prioritize that. So it can be an opportunity, it can be a threat. Based on, if it is a loss, then it can be a threat. If you can make some business out of it, then it is an opportunity. So that's how you can do that. So ranking can be done based on the EMV number which you get it. And opportunities, you would like to maximize it, and threats, you would like to minimize it. So this slide, if you see, it broadly gives you a risk response. If I divide it, it is into a negative risk and a positive risk. What a negative risk has, like there are 5 strategies which you can use. Say, suppose if I plan to go to to my office, and it is, say, suppose 20 kilometers from here. There could be traffic. So I see a Google map. I see that there is a traffic to it. What do? I see, is there any another route to go by that? If there is another route, I just turn around my plan. So what is that? Change of plan. So in avoid, what do? Is you change the project plan, and you try to eliminate the risk. Means you try to minimize, you try to get rid of that risk of getting delayed by choosing another route. So what, in short, in project management language, if I speak to, it is basically you change your scope. You change your plan according to your, seeing that, okay, it's dynamic. You take a very quick call. It's a dynamic situation. You just take that, see the situation, and change the plan accordingly. You will see what is the impact also. What is the impact of overall by changing the plan, whether it affects your schedule, whether it affects your cost. It's not that straightforward, but what it does is, if it is slightly simple, where logic can be, as I said, logic can be applied, you try to see that, quickly evaluate, you talk to the key stakeholders and see whether I can do this. If they say, go ahead, yes, you can do this, it won't impact and all. As a decision-making process, you will go forward and take it. There can be chances where they can say that, no, don't go it, because it can really risk and jeopardize this kind of a thing. So it's a kind of a situation where you have to take a call, which strategy can be opted. But generally, this is for avoid. Mitigate is you just reduce the probability. How do you do that? Vaccines. In COVID, if you take a vaccine, the probability, if you don't take vaccine, what is the probability? Probability will be very high that you can get infected. The second part is, if you take, the vaccine, the probability is that you will get less chances of getting infected. And even if you get infected, you won't get into the hospitalization mode. So that's the general norm. If you take out the numbers, you will see a lot of things in media. But to be honest, one case can kind of completely, jeopardize your entire thing, the fear in you. So I would really request people to think in, things in a more holistic manner, where you don't get panicked with just things. You see the numbers. If you see, there was an article maybe 1 month back where government had given the numbers of probability that how much people can, are really getting affected with the vaccine. And the number is so negligible, like 0.04%. What it means in terms of number is that out of 40,000, 4 people might be infected. Out of 40,000, 4 people might be, kind of getting serious side effects. That's the number. So, but what will happen is, when you see in media, oh, this person died out of it. But how many people were given that vaccine? 2 crore people were given vaccine, and out of which the number was what? Hardly anything. So what I suggest is that don't get panicked, and don't get carried away with, things with media or anything which can, digress. Don't get too many opinions and get digressed. So this is very important to understand why in general also, as a risk, in general for your life, in taking a decision making process, analyze it holistically, take what is the probability, you will get the data. And if you don't understand, take advice of someone who understands this so that he can guide you that what is the purpose of doing this. So that is very important. The typical transfer risk is used in finance. If you see finance, you will do insurance. Why do you do insurance? Suppose if I die with COVID, then my family is protected. Their interests are protected. I take an insurance for it. So by doing that, what I'm doing is I'm transferring my risk, my liabilities. The insurance will give safe money. Yes, I mean, at least partially my family is protected, but I would say, yeah, you won't get the person, but at least your family is protected in terms of monitoring. So in some way, you're securing yourself by doing the transfer of risk. Certain times, low risk, what do you do? These are generally accepted, like low risk will be accepted. If suppose an event occurs, then you have certain contingency and you use those contingencies. Coming to exploit situation, what happens is that when you, positive risk that is, there are again 5 strategies. So any new technology, what you would do is in COVID, you will see that a lot of apps are coming and you will try to do that data, artificial intelligence and all, you want to use it and make utmost use of it by doing the dashboards and all. So people have come up with dashboards which are pretty good and they are done. It is possible with new technology. So what you do is for that you need specific skills. You want to make sure that you get the right kind of skills to the persons for exploiting that conditions. So you want to build a technology company, you have to get the best of the talents who knows the technology, who understands the strategy, who understands the market, who understands the intellectual property of it. So there will be certain attributes which you need to assess, and based on that, you can take it up. The third part is you're enhancing your opportunity by adding resources. You add more resources to your opportunities which are there. So basically, you will be more focused. I identify that there's a business opportunity. I will say that, okay, hire few people in this particular, like for example, I want to develop a vaccine technology. I will try to hire that kind of people in advance, knowing that I will need to enhance this opportunity, you encash this opportunity. I will hire people in advance with that particular need, because I know that there's a lot of scarcity of resources right now, especially people won't travel in across this. So I'll have to look into the local people. All those kind of things you can do by adding resources. You can reduce the risk by joint ventures. One company might be very good in technology, one company might be very good in manufacturing. They can collaborate and share that kind of risk sharing partnership can be happening, and this is how the joint ventures happens, and you basically get a win-win situation out of it, because you get profit and you get kind of do a collaboration which will be beneficial to both. You are closing the weaknesses, or would say that you are strengthening your weak moderate areas or weakness areas by shaking hands. So that is how you can do that. And accepting opportunities is basically you just, whenever the opportunity comes, you try to encash. So this is a broad base where you can use the risk response plan into your risks, and these are generally done in the project levels. Now, same thing can be done on the larger level also. And that's it where I would like to give, like this examples I've already given you. I can skip this because this is broadly spoken about. The enterprise risk management is now very mandatory as per the Company Act 2013. Every company which is public listed have to give, this kind of enterprise. They have to have an enterprise risk management in their company, which will talk about what kind of risk the company has. And what kind of strategy. So strategy will also be a part of it. You identify the risk, and then how much risk is there, and then what are your plans to encounter that. The primary objective why the government has included this as a Company Act is that it will bring transparencies in the company. The company will understand the business needs. Business needs, yes, they do know that is the business need, but what are the chances of failures? Many companies don't, if you see, many companies have not employed this. But after this mandate, what is happening is slowly the companies are forced to do that. And in a way, it is benefiting companies because they can do a lot of stuff with enterprise risk management. So there are multiple components of enterprise risk management. What enterprise risk management is, basically it is done at a broader level, at a company level, where you do identify risk in each department and external, internal, how it impacts your company. You try to put your strategy. Say, suppose if I want to be an innovation company, then what I will do is I will focus on my R&D. I will try to bring in people who are very critical aspect of it. We'll try to include those kind of people, technology. Then it will give me a focus area that if I want to bring in, say, suppose CNS, or if I want to bring in vaccine, then what kind of people I have to bring, what kind of infrastructure I need to do, what kind of risk I have. So all those kind of things will be committed. Is the variant is coming? Am I dynamic? Am I agile? Am I, bringing in that kind of agility to do the business? So all those things will be covered in your enterprise risk management as a broad strategy. This is at very broad level. You don't speak about specific project, but you do speak about the broad level, and then you make sub projects of it. Then you will get a sub projects into it, and where you will target, many things that, okay, how should I kind of target this kind of things. So it increases the range of opportunities. It also does is that you can include your vision also, your strategy also, and your risk as an overall project. So by doing that, you increase the range of opportunities, and basically, you consider as all the positive as well as negative aspects of the risk. It gives you an identification of new opportunities. So obviously, it enables identifying the new opportunities which you get it out of it. It gives you a identification of unique challenges with current opportunities. So two ways you can look into it. Can I identify by doing this process what are the new opportunities? And trust me, when you do this process, you will identify that there are a lot of opportunities and loopholes which you can, so current loopholes you can fix, and you can identify new areas that, okay, let me target this and enhance my business. So when you do this in a very holistic manner, with at a very high level with all the stakeholders, you will realize that you will get a lot of opportunities out of it. You increase the business opportunity, which I already told about, negative, positive surprises, and based on that you can do it. Resource deployment also, I told you that you can prioritize that. So those kind of things I have mentioned it already. The key benefits is that you identify the potential constraints and you carry out strategy accordingly. So I already given you an example of new opportunities in innovation you can do, what kind of thing you have to bring in. So according to that innovation, you will try to strengthen your R&D, your IP structure. You will see that you don't, your IP is not stored. All those kind of things will come automatically as a cascading effect. If it is a manufacturing, innovation process you want to do, then you will look for technologies which are good for operation efficiencies. You will try to keep update yourself with all the technologies which are there in the market. And based on that, you will try to bring in your organization. You will partner, you will identify joint ventures or any of that sort. So this is how you strategize that, by identify that what you want to do, how you want to do, all those kind of things will be answered by doing this process. So as I said, you will have to include your vision, mission, strategy, values. By values, when I say that, is that if you want to make it a quality driven side of a manufacturing unit, then what you have to do is you have to really be proactive. That can I bring an organizational culture where people are so self-aware that they will take care of this entire on their own. They will take the onus, they will empower them. You have to empower them, and they will take a proactive measures for that. So that is very critical when you do this kind of stuff. So culture is one of the biggest challenge, I can assure you, whenever you are doing this kind of thing, whenever you want to bring in, risk is not an easy task when you are doing it. Many people are not aware in industry that, okay, this kind of concepts do arrive, and when they are, so it's a kind of a change, I would say, a very heavy change, I would say, bringing in, like suppose the organization needs digital transformation, then it is quite challenging to bring in this kind of change into the organization. Cultural change, cultural resistance is quite difficult to bring in. Any new technology for that matter, any change you want to bring in, it's always difficult. Any software kind of thing which you want your people who are not very tech savvy, it will be always challenging. So the challenge when you do projects, maybe individual or department wise, it's slightly, I would say, comparatively much more easier. But when you do it at organizational level, and when you want to implement anything on organizational level, it's quite a task, because generally I would say industries, the tendency of, there are very few things which can integrate, like project management. A PMO integrates the company's objective, and as a company you have to work as a group, not as a functional department. Now you will see generally in industry people work in silos, like in functional, that okay, operation, I will restrict my operational thing only, why should I risk for any other department or something like that. So it can happen, and it's very normal, because unless and until you don't have a kind of a PMO or anything which kind of integrates and gives, or top management takes a special effort, that okay, we have to integrate this and show them as a business objective, it is quite a task, and it takes time. This kind of cultural change, it does take time to kind of implement at a at a very higher level. So it's very important that buy-in from a leadership is very important. Once that's done, that's the most important thing. They will try to percolate towards the down level and bring it to the middle management level, higher management level, middle management level, and people at the lower level. So it is very important to percolate this kind of things. So if you see a typical enterprise risk framework, now I have taken for reference, I just wanted to tell two things. The sources which I've normally used is PMBOK for risk management, 6th edition, and the COSO ERM framework is the source which I have used as a guidelines for this kind of structure. There are other sources also which you can use, but these are the two ones which I have gone through. So I just thought I will, put the source of this. So basically, these guidelines will give you a broad overview. It is not industry specific, but it will just give you a kind of broad guidelines that okay, this is how you do it, and then you use a basically based on your project management ability, you will try to fit in all the needs, and you will kind of elaborate all the items which are there. So for example, mission, vision, core values, you will try to incorporate into that. Your strategy, you will try to incorporate in your this. So you list out based on the risk, or each and every department you go and tell that okay, what is my risk, and they will tell you that okay, this is like for example, regulatory, for pharmaceutical regulatory quality, you will always know that audits are very important, and to clear the audit you need to do certain set of things, and there are a lot of things you have to do in audits. So that preparedness, that culture, whether you are ready for it, so you list down that, and you do a lot of training programs according to it. So am I ready for it? That's the whole thing, and that's where you get help of this kind of things, which will help you down in breaking down your risk, and it will give you a broad guidelines that these are the essential steps we should take. It will help you prioritize that okay, which one should I prioritize. Also, there will be easy low hanging fruits we should take, this will be critical component we should take, all those kind of things. It will help you. So it's very essential that you talk to your stakeholders give you a lot of inputs, then a decision making of you help them in the decision making process, that why it is essential to segregate these baskets, and that like Pareto rule, 80% you will get the advantage out of 20% of the things, you will get 80% advantage out of it. So you focus on 20%, you get advantage of 80%. So that kind of in terms of value, that's where that 20% will have the 80% value. So that's why it helps you out. So business objective formulations, you have to see what is your business objective. As I said, you many things will be there. Whether I want to be a R&D kind of a company, whether I want to be a manufacturing company, whether I want to be in a clinical trial company where you, so like for example, clinical trials have risk where you can, it is difficult to get a volunteer base. So am I able to get the volunteers in time? Considering the COVID situation, already people are COVID, you don't know how it is, that segregation of that, all those kind of risks, you have to, you think it prior, you analyze that, you list it down, and then you kind of, you try to reduce, you try to minimize that. considering right now you see that digitalization is there, so you want systems which are like, you want to train your people to be tech savvy. If you see generally in the pharmaceuticals, people are not that tech savvy compared to like other industry, I would say IT or something like that. So it is very important that you train your people, you empower your people, give the confidence. Training and practicing always empower people, and that will really give you to the next level. So that is very critical. So you saw the brief framework of the ERM. So governance and culture. So where the governance and culture is done is coming, the organization, the culture is set from the top. The top management will give you that, okay, why we are doing, what is the importance of it. Um, Culture is also from ethical values, what are the desired behaviors. It is very essential because many people don't understand the risk concept at very mid level also. And when you talk into industry with many people, you will realize that, okay, people don't understand this concept so easily because it's not normally spoken about. So it's very critical that they understand the risk of the things which they are doing, and how they can plan, how they can reduce their bottlenecks. That's very critical. So that's how you can do that bit. And strategy, again, as I said, you that you can integrate your strategy. Um, the now, one thing which is very peculiar with companies is that their risk appetite would be very, different. Every company will have their own risk appetite. So I think so. You have to, every organization can fine tune their risk, and then based on that, they can do the design the risk and design the risk system according to that how much risk appetite you have, and then based on that you can categorize your projects. So that's how you do that. Already spoken about all this part of it. Once you do the prioritization of risk, severity, and all those things, I can show you a matrix which will really help you in understanding. Prior to that, what is the general process? So general process is you start with the vision, mission, value, and strategy, risk planning, risk identification, your risk assessment. Then once you identify the risk, you assess the risk, then you take the high risk into the registration. You basically then, once it's prioritized, then you take into the, identification, what is the risk response to it. And then you do the typical project management, that is track and monitor those projects individually. So type of risk, external risk, internal risk, you can categorize the risk as two broad wave, and then you can, have the strategic operational. So based on your organization, suppose if it's a manufacturing organization, they will focus on the operational one. If it's a consulting one, they will focus on strategic one. And external risks are typically, like all socio-political. Like for example, let me give you an example: dependency on China for the raw material. So that is an external risk. So what you do is you take it in an external risk, socio-political as a categorization, and then you try to build on that. So each risk you will kind of give a categorization of that kind of thing. A typical risk assessment impact. Is it catastrophic, major, moderate to high, minor? You can always fine tune according to your this thing. We have additional high to medium, but you can choose depending on like typical 5 ones, that is highest, high, medium, low, and very low risk severity. So this is how you can kind of do. And as I said you that what you typically do is you multiply impact. So 5 multiply and you get a risk severity number. And that is on the you categorize your risk. Although it might be there, it might be extremely difficult for making a strategy, whatever reason, it might be very high into the thing that is the action against it. So those are the typical kind of risks. The purple one is where you would like to focus as a company. That is your risk appetite. It can vary. Someone can choose also 12 ones if the company wants to be, wants to really make sure that. So it's the line really depends on organization to organization where they want to prioritize. These are the very broad guidelines which you can take it. So again, as I said, you can prioritize risk, and based on risk, you can kind of decide the actions. And non-prioritize, you cannot, you won't be taking actions. You will just keep it aside. Thank you very much for your, patiently listening to the seminar. And I hope that it has given some, value additions to you, and you might be taking up some cue from this webinar. And I will also like to, say that please stay safe and be safe. Thank you. And I would also like to thank my organization, which allowed me to, present this particular, because this is like sensitive information. So they allowed me to present it in a very broad way, which is much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manish. A very, very interesting and very insightful presentation, and taking us into the entire understanding on what risk management is all about and how can that be assessed, how can a strategy be designed, and it varies from companies to company, but eventually success would definitely depend on how good a risk assessment and the entire process is in place at a company level. So thank you, Dr. Manish, for a very, very insightful presentation. There are a couple of questions. I also have a question, but before that, let me take up the questions from the chat box. Mr. Ravish Jain has posted a question. What are the sources of information where you can get qualitative and quantitative data? And can you comment on the level of accuracy that can be bought in?
Thanks, Ravi. So the question, I mean, as I said you that the two sources which I used now for qualitative and quantitative, best would be PMBOK. You can use it, 6th edition, which gives you. So it's again you get this access from a Project Management Institute, which has the once you are a member you get a free edition of it. Otherwise, you can look into the net, and there will be a risk management ways where you can do qualitative and quantitative risk assessment. And as I showed you, the probability you have. So once, say, suppose you take one risk, say, suppose cyber security, let's presume one risk you take it. Now, if you are an IT company, there is a heavy dependency on cyber security. So the impact will be massive. So your impact would be on 5, because if suppose someone hacks your system, gone, your business is gone. So impact is 5. What are the chances of probability of happening it? A smaller organization, the risk would be relatively less. A larger organization, what will happen? You will see recently, a lot of pharmaceutical are facing phishing attacks and all those kind of attacks. It is very important that for you to train your employees that please don't touch upon your phishing mail or anything of that sort. So once you try to touch that, you are trapped into an attack. So a larger organization, the probability is that very high. Maybe you can take it as a 3 or 4. You take 4, 5, multiply it 20. It's a very high risk. Once it's identified as high risk, you list out what can I do. Can I have like a VPN sort of a system to circumvent it? Can I train my people who are doing it? So there are two components to it. One is accuracy. I would say to answer your accuracy, again, you have to talk to your stakeholders, understand it from your expert, that is IT expert. He will give you insight that, okay, how much is the key? So one I've given is IT. It can be quality. So if it's a quality department, you have to talk to your quality stakeholders, then your management, how they perceive that risk. So there are stepways. You have to talk to each stakeholder, get the information as much as possible, and based on that, you kind of fine tune your, this calculation. You use a lot of common sense also, gut feeling also, that what is the realistic way. Now, that second way was always a possibility. how many organizations were prepared, how many organizations had taken an call that, okay, we will, prevent this well in advance by giving employees who are not essential for, to be in the office, they can work from home, they can use laptop and they can use them. How many might have taken that? That proactiveness is very important. And calculation, as I said, you can always use PMBOK, which is having a detailed way of doing how this kind of calculations. There will be a lot of examples also how to calculate that. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you. There's another question from Abhishek Mittal. Can you share examples of biggest enterprise risks life sciences organizations face and how organizations respond to it?
So Abhishek, as you might have seen, I have given you some of the examples of life sciences like dependency of China. So raw material dependency of China is a typical one. You remember that when we had, everyone was 80% of the world was dependent on the raw material, pharmaceutical raw material in China. Everyone knew that. Now, whether it was wise for organization, now I would tell you that organization which might have gone for enterprise risk management, I'm pretty sure they might have realized that okay, China as a region, if something goes wrong tomorrow, China and India can go on war, not just COVID.
कौन सी मिस हुई है?
COVID. So all those things are there, a probability, a very high probability that anything can happen with China. On one country dependency is very risky from socio-political as well as from your region point of view, where you can go to war or relation can go sour or other things is all these things. All these things is very important. And to counter that, the key is that you plan to look what are the key important KSMs or raw materials which you are thinking, list them. Then what is the next step is that you would kind of go and see what is more critical to my business. So you kind of focus, prioritize, minimize the number of in terms of number, like out of 50 ingredients, you will come down to maybe 30 by prioritizing. Then again, from business impact value, you will come down to maybe 10. So you take that 10 and then try to see alternate source. Is it possible? If there is no alternate source, can I build it in-house? So those, can I partner with someone other than Chinese? So all those kind of things will be as a counter strategy. So that's how I have just given one area, one example. Various examples can be like I've given you the cyber security also. So cyber security, again, you can counter this way. So there are a few examples which I've given to counter that, which are typically happening in the life science industry.
Thank you. Next question, couple of questions I will post and then you can answer that. The one question is from Arush. How can we remove subjectivity in the risk scoring process? And another question is from Himanshu. When we talk about change management or cultural change, which approach is more effective, top down or bottom down? So go ahead and answer both the questions. Over to you, Dr. Manish.
Okay, so I was not able to understand, the first question, that is subjectivity. When you say what exactly, is it subject matter expert you are asking? Can I just get some more elaboration? And in the meantime, you get the response. I will answer Himanshu's question. So Himanshu, change management, I think so the area is extremely broad. And whenever you want to bring in a change, that is a very difficult area to do in any organization for that matter, and especially in pharmaceutical per se, because you know that tech savviness or bringing in any change for that matter culturally is quite difficult, and you have to use various you can use various frameworks for countering that, since it is beyond like McKinsey's 7Cs is one of the examples. Then Capgemini has one framework. So there are various frameworks, and it depends on whether it is customer centric approach you want, or whether you want a basic change where you bring one level to another level. For me, for simple is that bringing a change from one state to another state is how I make it simple. I don't want to complicate things. I follow a very simple strategy that if I want to bring a change, today my organization is here, I want to bring in tomorrow to this level. For that, what are the essential steps? what are the challenges. I will list it down. And the key part is, I would say from top it has to come. If top is aligned, it can percolate towards the down. So from top to bottom, it has to go. And then you can always go to the bottom level and kind of say that explain it in detail, that why it is important. You have to make them aware that you have to why it is essential business perspective. If you do this, you get this benefit. So the larger picture has to be shown at the down level. Many people do mistake that we should not show the larger picture, but it is very essential that if you don't do, we might lose business and we might be out of business. And you know that if we are out of business, then obviously it affects every individual of us. So that is very important, that why I'm not saying that you kind of give tension to them, but in a very nice and a subtle way, you explain them and show them the larger picture. So that's how you basically would do that. So I hope that answers you broadly to your question.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. And let me now request very quickly Arush to unmute himself and then elaborate more on his question about subjectivity scoring. So can I request Arush to unmute and explain the question further?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Manish. By subjectivity, I meant is whenever we do risk assessment, what typically happens are the department heads are, not very keen in scoring their risk very high, for the obvious reason that it comes under the management radar and various other reasons. So they do kind of lower their risk score, and when we go for survey, because to remove the biases, still normally the risk, there is a lot of subjectivity involved in scoring based on the person's experience and knowledge. So any way where we can reduce the subjectivity to have a real risk score?
So I agree with you. This is a very typical challenge. It varies from person to person, and I said that in my initial talk only, that the appetite of organization and then what the management perceives and then what the stakeholder perceives, you just take in. But end of the day, I mean, you have to sync it and explain it. You have to sync it and explain it. That it is very essential to highlight. It is very essential. It is very essential to highlight.
Dr. Manish, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So Arush, I didn't realize. My apologies that I was talking without unmuting.
No, it was just last couple of sentences. Rest all was pretty audible. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that basically it is very essential to, so few things which you can do is that if you are the one who is doing the assessment, then I can tell you that you should be taking some authority. You should get some authority for that you can influence your stakeholder. That is very important. You will face in any organization you go. Your stakeholder will always try to minimize, because as you said, it will look bad in the front of people, and they will try to kind of influence to minimize that. So it is a very, very important aspect which you have mentioned, and you have to counter upfront, saying that, so what I feel is this is, and in a very collaborative way. If not, then you have to be a bit slightly aggressive also. I see that it is very important that the objective of this, because you are the one who is responsible on bringing this, to the management or to the overall assessment. It is very important that you give your notes as an independent assessor. So it is, you will upfront say that what I feel is this is much more higher risk for this reason. You counter them. And then once you counter them, then they have to, again, they can counter you back. And then you bring both the story in front of the management, and then let the management take a call. I have seen this happening, that if the management is keen, definitely that will happen. And for me, luckily, I would say that whatever I thought did happen in my organization, at least, because the buy-in is of management is also very important. And the why primarily why you are doing it is you're making sure that you're bringing transparency in your system. So it is very important that you bring transparency by talking it upfront and tackling it, because if it happens tomorrow, then the loss is for the organization. So definitely management has to buy in transparency and this part. So that is one component. Regarding subjectivity, I would say that the challenges that will always vary, and you will see that my assessment was also subjective in quite a way, where you give the impact like it can be 3, 3.5, 4. Again, varies to person. So you talk to the stakeholder and see what they think and the numbers. So you include finance also, that are my impacts, what I'm assessing is right. And also the stakeholders, for example, as I said, you quality. If the audit goes wrong, or the entire organization comes to standstill, the business loss is very heavy. So you can't take lightly. So you have to be very, strict with your assessment and very transparent in your assessment. Ethical part is very important. So you bring it, your view. If it is taken, good. If it is not taken, at least I feel that you should document it, bringing in your perspective and others' perspective. You reduce the biasness and you bring more fairness. You bring both the sides of the story, saying that what they said and what you said, and then you kind of assess. So it's lot. Let me tell you, it's a very hard process. You have to continuously talk to your stakeholders, continuously, one-on-one, and keep on getting the feedback and keep on monitoring this. It's a very lengthy and tedious process, but it is very, very important in terms of strategy and business way forward. I hope this answers you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Arush, for the question. And thank you, Dr. Manish. May I now request Murali Gotumukula, followed by Mr. Balaji. You can unmute yourself and share your views also on this. So first, Murali, followed by Balaji.
Okay, it's not question from my side. Hi, Manish. This is Murali. I'm a colleague of Manish. Just I added my answer is regarding subjective. Instead of the same, it's already explained by Manish. I think we should rating based on available documented evidences by subject matter experts as well as evidences. Instead of thinking and this is available, no, like this. That just I put my suggestion. It's not in a question.
Sure. I mean, for that only, just to add up your comments only, you were invited. So thank you, Mr. Murali.
Thank you, Murali.
Can I request Balaji also to just add up his point of view? I think that's really interesting.
Yes. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So to add on to this discussion, risk committee members should be well qualified and they should be expert for each different risk assessments. So once they have the team, and QA will be the final approval. So in case of this kind of bias or subjectivity with respect to rating, QA will be the final decision maker. And if any concerns is there, then we can have a proper justification to the specific where your rating is low or medium. So in that case, you have to properly justify why we are doing that part of things. So that will be, capable to substantiate your decision, and you can, explain to the inspector in a very well way.
Thanks, Balaji. Just to add, actually, I mean, honestly, we don't have a kind of a QA system. What we do is a more of a collaborative, where we take the subject matter expert, management. And then what we do is we kind of brainstorm, put all the perspective and counter each other. So it's confronting, collaborating, all the kind of techniques we use and kind of discuss. And then, as I said, it's more on, if you have number, please put it across. If you have evidence, please put it across. And each and every angle has to be listed into it to make a kind of a holistic view out of it. Thanks. I mean, I didn't know that QA is also included as a part of the risk committee, but we have a very different structure. I mean, as a company, we take as all the experts, subject matter experts, and then we kind of discuss in the similar manner, which I told you, that each stakeholder has been taken, and then management, we take certain experts. And then at very high level, we discuss each and every aspects and then come to a conclusion that, okay, this looks to be more appropriate. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manish, and thank you, Balaji. And lastly, let me invite R.R. Balakrishnan, and then followed by, first let R.R. Balakrishnan also share his views.
Yeah, I've been in the risk-related thing, especially with the reference to fire explosion and toxic release. We have a very strong generic data on frequencies, and we do have a mathematical modeling to know how much it can impact surrounding area. So there is no subjectivity there because this is all taken from large information, this thing from various sources. So as far as fire, explosion and toxic thing, which are important for manufacturing risk, these are consistently done, and it is being supported even in the government agencies to know what can go wrong and how it can be affected. And as doctor was saying, the most important thing in my view is something we have to touch upon is business continuity plan. Because when you start doing the business continuity plan, even the China matter will come into the picture, and then we will know what are the things that will really impact the organization as such for continuity of going ahead with this. So I think the BCP must be included end of the day when the risk management studies are being completed, and know where the gaps are there and what happens in case of these gaps come into the picture. Secondly, the matrix 1 to 5 on frequency and 1 to 5 on impact. Multiplying it is a good idea, but at the same time, as a risk manager, I always believe severe consequences are there, and even though it is remote, we have to give adequate attention to that, because nobody would have predicted a COVID will sweep and we will be caught. And if anybody would have said that it is remote, but the point I'm trying to make is very, very low frequency, but high impact events. If you can, black swan events can be identified, then you have got to attend to it and address it. So that is the important factor that must be get into the heads of the top management. Thank you.
Thank you, Balakrishna ji. One thing which I really liked about is that you said that you have the, the numbers can, you can further elaborate on the numbers by mathematical models. And we do that. I mean, what we have done is more on the financial side. So what we do is take the financial part of it, try to see what is the number of that specific risk. And then multiply it with all this severity which I told about, and see that, okay, how much it can impact the business. There are various mathematical models, and again, it is risk to risk. It can change, I believe. I have personally not done, but I have done in a very broad and elaborative, I would say more on, as I said, you that probability into impact into your financial model, and then take into the consideration that, okay, what will be the overall business impact by multiplying it like EMV method. You can do, as you said, if you have specific models, that will really help you to be more specific. And as I said, your evidence and data helps you. Like, for example, business intelligence, we do use a lot of numbers which are there, which will be, fetched from the market. And based on those numbers, you take a decision that, okay, this is going to impact my business severely, so let me take it as a priority. So you do take that kind of numbers into account and then take a decision in prioritizing. So thanks, Balakrishna. I mean, it will be great if I can connect with you, and we will learn more from you.
Thank you, Dr. Manish, and thank you to all the people, all the experts from project management, and who all really raised very valid questions. And just in continuation with business continuity plan and other risk mitigations highlighted by R.R. Balakrishnan, would like to pose this question to Dr. Manish first, and then we would expect all the people, including R.R. Balakrishnan, Dr. Manish, of course, will throw some light on that, and also from Manish as well as Abhishek and Balaji. If all of you, within one minute, if you can share your views on, if you take all these things, project management, risk mitigation and assessment and control, and we look into this current scenario of COVID, So I would like to pose this question to all of you, and you can share your views in a minute or two, one by one, before we conclude the session. Like, where did we go wrong? In last 1 year or so, we have seen drastic crisis situation across sectors, not only life sciences. And I can imagine that most of the companies will have their risk management or project management teams in place. But we have seen huge impact on various sectors. Like one of the example during your presentation, you shared about the digitalization, like we were not prepared. But once we were thrown into this condition, everybody has eventually adapted to this digitalization platforms, right? Same way, now we are seeing, like I just shared earlier, that we are the third largest manufacturer, exporter of vaccines and medicines, a pharmaceutical industry, third largest in the world. And today we are facing huge crisis of vaccines for our own country, right? And even for the repurposed drugs, be it remdesivir or any other medicines. So just trying to understand two ways from each one of you experts that where did we go wrong as a world or as an industry in India, and what is the way forward? Still, it's not too late, because as we are now hearing that we are gearing up for the third wave. So still, as a suggestions and as a recommendation from all of you, let's have your views, what went wrong and how we can still work towards minimizing all this risk and in order to handle this situation in a better way. So let's start with the speaker, Dr. Manish.
See, personally, I feel that whenever you do any risk assessment, say suppose you make a lot of hypothetical things, like say suppose hacking, if you think, or anything of supply chain disruption, what you have to do is that it happens. You have to presume that, and based on that, if it happens, what I do that sense has to be felt, and once you felt, you run a kind of a way. You will try to kind of think run over that as a mock, where you will just see that okay, this would happen, then this will get affected, that will get affected. So you have to rerun that thing, that if I have faced this scenario in crisis, this is what happened. And if I have to minimize that, what will be the best logical thing? You can draw a lot of things and write it on paper that, okay, I will do this, I will do that. Government, was right in doing that. Vaccination is good and you have to target the first, who are vulnerable. That's true. And you cannot, directly tell everyone to get into that part. But I feel that it is responsibilities of everyone as a citizen also. And most important, media plays a very important role. I feel that media should have, give evidences, give information which is not too much, and don't rely too much on WhatsApp. I feel, those kind of things you should avoid. Too much of reading of WhatsApp, or something which, you have to be very positive in this kind of times, because your mental stress and all will add up to your problems. So I think so those kind of mental conditioning is very important. And panicking and making panicking is the last thing you want. Easy to say than done, agreed, but that's how it has to be. You have to kind of do some cushioning with mental strength to people in a very positive way. You have to be positive and make others also positive about it. So I think so that's very critical. I felt what was missed out is that this kind of things has to be, as I said, there has to be certain people with clear roles and responsibility. Normally, what happens is in organization, either I shouldn't be commenting at government level, because I don't know how they might have managed. They might have managed rightly also. But what I generally feel, where because to do at smaller organization level only, it is so difficult. You can imagine at a 140 crore people, how difficult it would be. It's easier to say and comment sitting at a room, but in reality, we also know that it is difficult. But what I feel is that it has to be broken down into bits and pieces, where each and every state takes an responsibility. Who are the people who are going to take the responsibility as volunteers? Like, for example, if there are very many volunteer organizations, they should come up with a proper plan saying that let's help the government organization to think through. You can kind of support them in many ways in right thinking that what I mean, if you kind of question in a right manner that we are there to support you, not to question you or counter you or confront you, you do it, but in a subtle way. I think so that can kind of help overall kind of this thing. So that's my way. Break it down into pieces, small pieces at a state level. Then state may, what are the volunteers who organization, non-profit organization which can help you out in this, who understands this kind of risk organization, like people in the profession or PMIs, or all those kind of people can come in and pitch in for this kind of stuff. That's my view, where you can do it in a very organized way, in a bits, breaking it down and going down to people and translating it into the kind of thing. But I always feel that you have to run through, you have to always simulate. Simulation is a very important process for anyone. Even we simulate interviews, if we do everything, so that we just kind of get better prepared. So I think so that's very important step for anything.
So, thank you, Dr. Manish, and I take your point very well said, that it needs to be percolated from top down, from the government, central government to state government, to even at a district level, at a taluka level, at a taluka or a panchayat level, at a village level, at a society level. So all the three things, roles, responsibilities and duties, needs to be percolated all throughout, and I think eventually it can be controlled. So good point. We now request one by one very quickly to start with R.R. Balakrishnan. If within a minute or two, if you can share your views also, Mr. R.R. Balakrishnan.
I agree with the doctor, and what risk means building scenarios. And here is the scenario is COVID. And
scenario
is a near miss, like first wave is like a near miss. Now we should have had breaking down everything, what really brought in and what are the preventive steps. Then we will know what are the components that is required to really mitigate the loss of life. Then oxygen would have come out as one of the key aspects. And we would have really not be ready with the beds, but also what are the other facilities that are required. And once you break down into smaller and smaller elements to mitigate the risk, you will know where you stand with reference to your resources. And then you implement everything. I think that would be the correct approach. But unfortunately, I think we were firefighting on one side and hope that it will not occur again.
Sure, thank you. May I now request Balaji also to share his views on this?
So
Manish Biryani, sir.
I think someone is expecting some discussion with Manish, Dr. Manish.
No, go ahead, Mr. Balaji. I think
yes.
It is.
Sorry. In my view of this pandemic situation, as we rightly discussed about from central to state, the team is working effectively on that part, and the same sensation should be there from down to top also. Down to top also, which means that individuals should be very much responsible, because the risk is for the individuals. Okay, at the end we are getting trouble for individual each one of us. So how best we have to be very safe in this situation, that is very important. And the people should really follow all these restrictions and the SOPs, whatever government has been advising them. Keep yourself isolated in case of quarantining when you have some kind of symptoms, as well as when you have some want to go for somewhere, you should be very much protective and make a safe distance. So this individual self-respects or self-discipline to be really followed, that will help individuals to save their lives. Because I see very many cases in last 2 weeks because of people keep traveling, and even in IPL we can see that someone got infected and he told that he went out for for some kind of treatment to the hospital and get back and got completely made the situation very bad. So this is once again equally responsible individual to take the self-discipline also.
Thank you, Balaji, and very nice views, well noted. Can I finally request Himanshu also to share his views, and then would like to invite, we are so honored to have Vijay Maru sir also on the call for his final comments and and concluding remarks. But before that, would request Himanshu to share his views also.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think it was a wonderful session. So only a couple of things from my side. One is on the comment from Balaji saying that somehow QA has to approve this thing. So I think we are talking something which is beyond QA at an enterprise level or at an organizational level. So I'm not really sure how QA plays role. Maybe QA can be act as a subject matter expert. But this is something which is governed by an independent body with the help of all stakeholders. So something a formal QA approval and all may not be required because it's a different level. It's not something to do with quality. So that's my thought. And another point I just wanted to highlight here is on my previous question to Mr. Manish on the effectiveness of any change. So it can be done top bottom from management pushing to all the employees to adopt it, or there is another way from where we start inculcating that culture from the actual users and then slowly translate that into the organizational goal. So I personally feel when we talk about sustainability, so implementing top down is maybe easy where you where management can push all the employees and get it done immediately. But when we talk about sustainability, I feel when you go bottom up, that's something which adds value, and it will be a long term because it starts building from your the lowest level who is working in the organization. From there, it will connect to the organizational goals kind of thing. So that's only my thought. Nothing else. Wonderful session. Different topic, and thanks to Dr. Manish and the organizing committee for all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu.
Thanks. I just wanted to add one thing here that Himanshu brought a very important part in this, all the discussion, and that is, the key was that sustaining. So for sustaining, yes, I agree. It's easy to kind of bring in risk, monitoring, tracking, everything, but to have it sustained continuously with this kind of tracking mechanism and monitoring mechanism, it is very important that the people at down level are empowered, and they are as I said that it is very nurturing and nourishing and kind of empowering the culture which brings positivity. That why we are doing, you show them the bigger picture is very key, I felt, and that's the reason it helps. And the second point which he highlighted was like even in my organization we don't have a QA system, so I thought maybe it might be in some other organization. But traditionally, this is what a standard format is, that you will have a committee, internal committee, and an external committee. External committee will be your board members, which is very high level kind of a committee. And internal committee will be your like all the stakeholders, key stakeholders, like subject matter expert, and then your kind of top management. So that's how normal the structure is. But yeah, it can vary from organization to organization. So this is what at least my organization does, and this is what I have heard according to whatever I have learned from this COSHO or even PMI, or in general talking to individuals who are experienced in very well experienced in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. And before I request Vijay Maru sir for his concluding remarks, may I finally invite Abhishek Mittal also to share his views. Okay, so maybe Abhishek is not there. So then would request Vijay Maru sir, and would like to, before I call him, would like to emphasize and share with all of you that this LSSDC License Sector Skill Development Council webinar series is a monthly webinar series, and we take up one or the other topics all the way, as I said, from drug discovery to impurity profiling to IPR to vaccine development, biologics development, to today's topic of risk management and enterprise risk management. We'll be going further. We'll be continuing these efforts for the rest of the year, and maybe we will be having 2 webinars in a month also, and we are going to now get into quality assurance about computer system validations, artificial intelligence, big data, and then also several other areas from a scientific thing. And for all these efforts, Vijay Maru sir is one of the very important member of our core team, and thanks to him for his efforts also. And now let me invite Vijay Maru sir for his concluding remarks.
Mr. R. Venkatachalam is there? Mr. R. Venkatachalam? Okay. Dr. Manish Vianney, full marks to you. Nice presentation on very important topic. Very well presented with colorful slides. Difficult subject made easier. The key is that he has been long associated with Granule top level management. It was basic. We can keep one more webinar with case studies. There are so many pharma companies failed in with good background in other area. It is not necessary that one area person is successful in one another area, he will be successful in pharma companies. You have to consider pharma specialization. JK Tyre and Apollo Tyre is the best example. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay sir. And again, on behalf of Life Science Sector Skill Development Council, all the organizing committee, our core team, I would like to thank all the participants. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you for your time on Saturday morning, for your precious 1.5 hour time for being there. And special thanks to our speaker, Dr. Manish, for really making such a wonderful presentation and breaking down all the details about risk mitigation, identification, and the strategies to be in place. And also special thanks to all the panelists who actually asked very relevant questions and later on shared their valuable views and insight into different questions and points raised by the committee. So thank you everyone. And finally would like to again remind you that this is a monthly event. So we'll keep doing this educational drive. We'll continue this drive. And as I said, Life Science Sector Skill Development Council is a non-profit and working, it is actually formed by NSDC, by Ministry of Skill Development Entrepreneurship. So for any of your skill development initiatives, be it academia, be it industry, be it training partners, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you out, because I feel together we can really contribute very little, but if everybody's contribution comes in, then we can really make a dream of our Honorable Prime Minister true, that is to make India skill capital of our country. So the whole mission of Life Science Sector Skill Development Council is to encourage more and more skill development, and we are there to support you wherever you need, and with completely no commercial interest. It is purely not for profit and a government organization. So with that, let me just conclude this. Once again, thank you all of you for your time. Stay healthy, stay safe, and let's connect sometime in near future, either within this month of May or in first week of June, with yet another interesting topic from the life sciences. So thank you all. God bless you and have a great weekend to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.